First encounter. My name's Eric. I'm a 31-year-old software engineer who finally took the plunge and quit the desk job for a long, solo hike on the Pacific Crest Trail. I started at the Mexican border in late April, chasing that half-crazy dream of walking to Canada. I wasn't the fittest or most experienced hiker out there, but I'd done my homework, gear dialed in, food resupplies mapped, body slowly adjusting to the rhythm of trail life. I thought I knew what I was getting into. Blisters, sunburn, maybe the occasional black bear. I wasn't prepared to come face to face with something that shouldn't exist. The Pacific Crest Trail is long, beautiful, and unforgiving. Some thru hikers crave the solitude. I didn't. I liked towns, people, voices, but after weeks alone, I'd learned how to handle silence. What I couldn't handle were the sounds that didn't belong. I first noticed it somewhere past Kennedy Meadows. I'd logged over 700 miles. The aches had faded. I was hitting my stride, but something felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It wasn't some big moment, just a pattern of things not quite adding up. The crack of branches when the air was still, and the occasional smell of wet fur. My footsteps weren't the only ones crunching pine needles. Something paused when I paused, started again when I moved, always at a distance, always just far enough for me to doubt myself. By the time I crossed into the Sierra, I was sure. I wasn't alone. I'd sleep with my kettle propped by the tent door, so I'd hear if something nudged it. I'd find it knocked over every other morning. Never clawed, never taken, just moved. At first I thought bear or maybe a cougar, but I knew what those looked like. I knew their patterns. This wasn't that. This thing followed, watched, studied. One morning near mile 403, I found prints. They weren't boots. They weren't hooves. 5 toes. Broad pad. Deep impressions, like a person's foot. Only longer, heavier, and set at strange angles, like the thing dragged one foot when it walked. And then there were the claw marks, if that's what they were. They didn't curl like a dog's or bear's. They etched sideways, off-center, too long and too thin, as if the creature dragged its fingertips through the soil like a sculptor gone mad. It looked impossible, wrong, like something that combined characteristics of both human and animal, but wasn't either. That night, I pitched my tent close to a granite outcrop, only one way in or out. I built a small fire, like every night, and stayed up until it burned down to red coals. I don't remember falling asleep, but I remember waking. The fire was out, and something was breathing outside the tent. Heavy, difficult breathing, like the thing, whatever it was sick. Not wind, not my imagination, just beyond the nylon wall. I didn't move. My fingers hovered over the zipper of my sleeping bag, too afraid to make a sound. I could hear it walk around. It circled once, then silence. Maybe 10 minutes passed, maybe more. I was still frozen, barely breathing, when I heard it again. A soft moan, followed by the faintest crunch of rock. I turned my head slowly toward the mesh window at the back of the tent. There was something out there, just beyond the fire pit, barely visible in the starlight. Something crouched on all fours at the edge of the clearing. At first I thought it might be a bear, but the way it moved, the posture, it was wrong. Its shoulders were too high, forelimbs too long and slender. It shifted weight like a gorilla, but with an unnatural stillness, like it was deciding whether to come closer. I couldn't see its face, just the outline, broad, hunched, massive, the way it swayed slightly, as if testing the air, and then it moved, not toward me, but to the left, disappearing behind the granite outcrop. I didn't dare breathe until the sky began to pale. I stayed awake until dawn. When I finally stepped outside, there were no tracks, nothing disturbed, except for a few things. My kettle was lying 10 feet from the tent, half buried in pine needles, as if it had been dropped or tossed. The bear spray canister that had been tucked beside it, right at my feet inside the tent, was outside too. Its safety cap still intact, but the metal scuffed and dented. Both showed faint but unmistakable claw marks, long, curved, uneven, as if something with fingers, real fingers, had picked them up, inspected them, and then left them behind. The thought made me dizzy. It had been inside the tent, while I slept, close enough to take things from beside my feet. I didn't eat that morning. I packed and left fast. Walked all day. Didn't stop for lunch. I passed hikers going southbound, but didn't say a word. Before nightfall, I was off the trail, hitching a ride into Bishop. I just wanted walls between me and the trees, a door that locked, a roof that didn't rustle when something walked by. I didn't care if it was a motel with peeling wallpaper or a friend's spare couch. I just needed the forest behind me. The sight of those endless pines made my stomach knot. Every shadow between the branches felt like a threat. I didn't want adventure anymore. I wanted escape. That was the last time I went hiking. Second encounter. My name's Theo. I'm 34, a seasonal trail medic and search and rescue volunteer. I've seen a lot out here. Dehydration, injuries, hypothermia, even a suicide once. But nothing like what happened just below the snow line on the Pacific Crest Trail near the Washington border. It was early in the season. Too early. The snowpack was still thick above 6,000 feet, and most thru-hikers hadn't pushed into Washington yet. I wasn't even supposed to be that far north, but I had gotten a call about a missing hiker who'd been trying to beat the season. No contact for days. Last known ping from a GPS beacon was off a ridge near Glacier Peak. I made camp below the snow line. Cold, thin air, dense pines, absolute silence, except for the wind groaning through the trees. I'd been on the trail for 8 hours and hadn't seen a single footprint in the snow ahead of me, just wind-swept drifts and old animal tracks. The next morning, I moved uphill, checking drainages and tree wells for signs of someone having taken shelter. Around mid-afternoon, I found a torn backpack half buried under a deadfall, canvas shredded like it had been clawed, not torn by rocks or weather. A few items had spilled out: a cracked headlamp, a crushed chocolate bar, shredded maps. No blood, no body, just wreckage. Not far from the pack, I found something worse. A staggered set of footprints, one clearly human. Hiking boots, thin tread, the right size for the missing hiker. But beside them were other, deeper impressions. Wider, flat-soled at first glance, but the toe splay was wrong, too far apart. Clawed, like something had walked beside him or followed him. I kept moving, tracing the prints to a dense stand of pines where the snow thinned under thick branches. There, half hidden in the brush, was a crude shelter. Logs leaned into a trunk. Tarp scraps tangled in the branches. A fire pit sat cold and filled with snowmelt. There were signs someone had stayed here. Drag marks in the snow, pieces of food wrappers, a water bottle half full and frozen. But what chilled me was the extra set of clawed prints leading right into the shelter, and none leading out. Something had gone in after him, and only one set of prints walked away. Curious and rattled, I followed the single set of clawed prints that left the shelter. They led downhill into a ravine, where old snow met mossy stone and tangled roots. The air was colder down there, still. Halfway down, I found something lodged in a thicket of branches. A torn piece of jacket, human, yellow, synthetic, the kind long-distance hikers use. As I came closer, I could see the stains. Blood, dark and dry, smeared across the nylon. Threads clung to nearby branches, like it had been dragged or snagged in a struggle. A few feet away, the snow was churned up and scattered with broken pine needles. It looked like someone had fought to stay upright and failed. I stood there for a long time, breathing through my nose, trying not to make a sound. Every instinct told me to leave, to stop looking. But I kept scanning the ravine, heart hammering. The silence wasn't just stillness. It was suppressive, like being underwater, like the forest itself was holding its breath. I took one step backward, then another, and finally turned away, never letting the tree line out of my sight. I retreated slowly, watching the woods the entire time. Later that day, I made the call. The hiker was dead. It had to be an animal attack. There was no other explanation I could give that wouldn't sound insane. I recorded the report into my sat beacon with a flat voice and trembling hands, then turned off the device and just sat by the fire for a while. The trees felt closer than before. I had the overwhelming urge to leave, to get out of the woods, to feel bitumen under my boots and see something built by people. But I was still 2 days' hike from the nearest ranger station, and with the light fading fast, I had no choice but to pitch my tent again. One more night, just one more night out here. That night, I forced myself to eat something dry and half-frozen. Crackers, a strip of jerky. I sat cross-legged in the vestibule of the tent, headlamp on low, bear spray within arm's reach, every bite feeling like chewing sand. The forest was dead quiet. No wind, no night birds, just the occasional creak of snow-laden branches settling in the dark. Then I heard it, a soft crunch of snow, slow and deliberate, circling just beyond the tree line. I stopped breathing, sat perfectly still, listened. Something was moving around me, big but low to the ground. Each step sounded heavy, the kind that sinks deep into soft snow. Once or twice it stopped and I could hear it breathe, slow, wet inhales like someone with damaged lungs. Then, just as I reached for the bear spray, something brushed the tent. A few yards behind me, I jumped to my feet, flashlight in hand, and swept the beam across the tree line behind my tent. Nothing but trees and snow until I caught a glimpse of something low and pale slipping between two trunks. I ran 3 steps toward it, then stopped. Whatever it was had moved on all fours, fast but somehow weird, almost grotesque. It hadn't made the kind of noise a bear or elk would have. It had touched the tent, deliberately. That was no animal's curiosity. That was a test. I swung the beam back and forth, heart hammering in my ears, and that's when I saw it. Just for a second, a single eye, reflecting the light like wet glass, wide, unblinking, set too far to the side of a head that was mostly obscured by underbrush. I could barely make out the shape, twisted, sunken, framed by fur or matted hair, but what I saw didn't look right. The skin was gray, the fur patchy, the features lopsided, as if the thing's skull had been broken and never healed properly. My breath caught in my throat. Something primal screamed at me to look away, to pretend I hadn't seen it, to run for my life, but I couldn't. I was frozen in place, staring at that ugly, distorted face in the dark, knowing full well it was staring back. Fueled by raw panic, I stumbled back to the fire and started throwing in every piece of wood I had left. Wet, dry, didn't matter. The flames rose fast, crackling and spitting sparks into the freezing air. I didn't care if it made me visible. I wanted light, heat, a barrier. I couldn't go back into the tent. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even sit. I just stood there, flashlight gripped in one hand, bear spray in the other, watching the trees around me. Every few minutes, I heard movement, twigs snapping, snow crunching, but never saw anything. The creature never showed itself again. It didn't need to. It knew I was trapped, and it knew I was afraid. I watched the woods all night, fire roaring behind me, too terrified to even blink. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared into the dark, waiting for the sun to come up. Nothing else happened that night. No more sound, no more shapes in the dark, just silence. A thick, watchful kind of silence that never let me rest. I stayed by the fire until the sky began to pale, my hands numb, my back aching from staying rigid for hours. As soon as the first real light broke over the ridge, I moved, fast. I packed up my gear in minutes, hands trembling as I began dismantling the tent. That's when I saw it. A single handprint smeared in drying blood across the back wall of my tent, twisted and oversized, like it had been left by something almost human. 5 fingers, long and warped, nails like claws. The print was crooked, as if the bones beneath the flesh weren't aligned right. I didn't examine it long. I should have taken a photo, bagged the tent, something, but I couldn't. I just stared for a moment, then turned away and started walking, fast, without looking back. I didn't stop until the trees began to thin and the air felt breathable again. That was my last shift in search and rescue. 3rd encounter. My name's Connor. I'm 27 from Sacramento, and this hike was supposed to be a reset. After a bad breakup and a burnout-level job, I sold half my stuff, left the rest in a friend's garage, and started north from Campo with a pack and a plan. Complete the Pacific Crest Trail solo. Well, not entirely solo. My dog, Rizzo, came with me. A wiry mutt with a shepherd's coat and a husky's eyes. Smart as hell and loyal to a fault. He slept curled against my legs every night, and kept his nose in the wind whenever we crossed fresh scat or prints. I wasn't a wilderness expert, just stubborn and ready to disappear for a while. By the time I hit Oregon, I'd gotten used to the rhythm. Wake, walk, eat, sleep, repeat. I hadn't spoken to another person in days. My legs were lean, my beard was coming in, and my thoughts had started to feel quieter. Until Crater Lake. Somewhere outside Crater Lake, Oregon, the trail thinned out, pines crowded the sky, and the air turned damp with early evening fog. I was 100 miles from the last major resupply and hadn't seen another hiker in 2 days. My phone was dead. No signal anyway, just forest. That's when I smelled wood smoke, faint, sweet, like cedar. I rounded a bend and saw it, a small campfire tucked in a clearing, ringed with stones, burning clean and bright. A woman sat beside it, stirring something in a blackened pot. She looked to be in her late 40s, athletic build, worn flannel shirt, gray tank top underneath, boots laced high. Her hair was pulled into a long braid streaked with silver. "You hungry?" she asked before I could say anything. Her voice was calm, even. I hesitated, then nodded. The trail had drained me and she didn't look like trouble. "Sit." I made too much anyway. As I moved toward the fire, Rizzo trotted ahead of me and sniffed around the edge of the clearing. The woman's eyes softened when she saw him. "He yours?" she asked. "Yeah, his name's Rizzo. Been with me since the start." She reached out a hand. The dog paused, then stepped forward, tail cautiously wagging. She scratched behind his ears and gave him a small chunk of beef jerky from a pouch on her belt. "Good boy. Smart eyes. Keep him close. Some things out here don't care much for dogs." She passed me a metal cup with something hot and vaguely tomato-scented. As I sat across from her, I noticed her gear, old but well cared for. Not ultralight, not store-bought, homemade stuff, patched with leather and waxed canvas. We ate in silence. "You solo?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah, well, except for the dog." "You?" "Not really," she said. "I stay out here. Off-grid. People call me a trail angel. Not the kind that leaves soda by the road. I just keep folks from going too far." I didn't understand what she meant. She didn't explain. Later, as the light faded and frogs began calling from a creek bed nearby, she leaned forward and said, "You know something prowls these woods, right? Not a bear, not a cat, something else." I forced a laugh. "You mean the Crater Lake monster?" She didn't smile. "No, I mean the thing with backward knees, the one that mimics your voice." She looked past me into the trees, her fingers tensed around the handle of her pot. "It comes closer when you talk." That night, I pitched my tent just a few feet from hers. Rizzo curled up as usual by my feet, the fire casting long shadows between our camps. I watched her sit motionless, eyes on the tree line until well after midnight. By morning, she was gone. No note, no sign of her having packed up, just vanished. The fire pit still warm. Rizzo and I continued on, her words gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. I told myself it was just folklore, trail talk to scare the new guys, but I kept him leashed that whole day, never letting him out of sight. That night, I pitched the tent on a slight rise, hoping for visibility, still uneasy. Then it came for us. Sometime in the dead of night, I woke to a sharp yelp. "Rizzo." I sat up, heart in my throat, just in time to see a blur of movement, something dark and hunched, dragging him out of the tent, illuminated by the dying campfire. It was fast, so fast, and moved wrong. Its limbs bent at unnatural angles, its back arched like some grotesque, muscular thing that didn't resemble any animal I'd ever heard of. For a split second, the firelight caught part of its head, elongated, furred, with wide, reflective eyes and a mouth that looked too long, too low. I froze, helpless, as Rizzo thrashed and kicked desperately, his nails scrabbling against the dirt, howling in blind terror. His cries cut deep. My brain refused to process what I was seeing. My dog, my companion through college, failed relationships and months of trail and silence, being yanked away by something that didn't look like it should exist. I almost pissed myself. Never in my life had I been so terrified. "Rizzo!" I screamed, finally, stumbling forward 2 steps before collapsing to my knees. My voice cracked. I shouted his name again, louder, until my throat burned. The sound bounced off the trees and vanished into the dark. He kept screaming, and I kept calling for him, useless and shaking. It didn't matter. Nothing answered but the snapping of branches and something growling just out of sight. Then came the worst, sounds of a struggle. Raw, violent. Branches snapping like bones, snarling so loud it echoed through the trees. Rizzo screamed. There's no other word for it. Long, terrified, almost human. Then a horrible, tearing sound, followed by yelps that turned into choked whimpers. Then silence. Then one last cry, piercing, agonized, absolutely desperate. Like he knew he was dying. Like he was desperately calling for help that wouldn't come because I was frozen in fear. And then, finally, that wet, choking whine. The sound of something vital being crushed. Then nothing. Just the wind in the trees and the fading pop of the fire. For a moment, I sat there frozen, unable to move. The heat from the coals doing nothing for the cold crawling up my spine. Then I crawled back into my tent, shaking. I zipped it shut like that thin layer of nylon could keep anything out. I found the bear spray and gripped it with both hands, holding it like a weapon, like a prayer. My knees were tucked against my chest. The coals hissed outside, casting faint orange light against the tent wall. I could still hear branches crack from time to time, not far off, like it was still out there, dragging, feeding. My face was wet, but I didn't realize I was crying until my hands started to slip on the canister. Just as I was about to relax a tiny bit, I heard a sound from the trees, a mimic of my own voice calling my dog's name. Warped, slow, and wrong. Then it growled, low and guttural, twisting Rizzo's name into something bestial, like it was trying to speak but didn't quite know how. Hearing that thing growl my dog's name in the dark was worse than anything I'd ever heard, worse even than his cries as he was torn apart. It knew that I was there. It taunted me. I didn't sleep at all that night. I just waited for the sun, whimpering and crying. When the light finally came, I ran. Left my pack, my tent. Left everything. Didn't stop until I hit the highway.